Hello everyone, and welcome to World War II at 80. I'm Ron May, your host, author, historian, and speaker on World War II history and the stories of those who served. We continue with our 21st episode today, focusing on the events and stories of September 1945. The United States had been thrust into World War II on December 7, 1941, with a 75-minute aerial attack of Japanese naval planes on the Navy's Pacific Fleet of ships at Pearl Harbor. The war dragged on for 3 years, 9 months, and 26 days. On September 2, 1945, at 9:02 a.m., the long and costly ordeal finally came to an end with a surrender ceremony lasting only 23 minutes on board the USS Missouri battleship. Peace wasn't a sure thing until Japan's leaders signed the official document of surrender and an occupation of Allied forces had begun. Getting to that point hadn't been easy. The initial peace effort began on July 29, 1945, when B-29 bombers from Saipan dropped over 3 million leaflets over Japan, informing her citizens of the Articles for Surrender stipulated by the Potsdam Declaration. More leaflets were dropped in the early days of August, warning Japanese citizens to evacuate the cities that were scheduled for bombing, including Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On August 14th, days after the 2 atomic bombs had been dropped, Japan's foreign minister finally accepted the unconditional surrender terms. On August 15th, President Truman announced to the U.S. public Japan's intention to surrender. Ceasefire orders from Emperor Hirohito were sent out to Japanese military units across the Pacific theater. In some cases, however, it took up to 12 days for some units to receive and respond to the order. These were tense days as both the U.S. and Japan were unsure whether hostilities might reignite fighting. The peace came closer on August 19th, when Japanese peace emissaries flew from Japan to the island of Ieshima on board 2 demilitarized Japanese Betty bombers. General MacArthur had instructed that the planes be painted with large green crosses on the fuselage to signify that they carried the peace delegates. After landing at Ieshima, the Japanese delegates then transferred to a U.S. C-54 plane to fly with U.S. officials to Manila in the Philippines to meet with Douglas MacArthur and review the drafted surrender documents. Martinsville, Indiana veteran Thomas McPhee got a peek at that Japanese peace delegation. McPhee personally witnessed the Japanese emissaries arriving at and departing from Ieshima on August 19th. The original date for the official surrender ceremony was scheduled for August 31st, but typhoon conditions in Tokyo Bay delayed the ceremony until September 2nd. General MacArthur selected the USS Missouri battleship to be the site for the surrender ceremony. He wanted the surrender to take place off land and on a ship in Tokyo Bay in case fighting broke out on land. During the 23-minute ceremony, representatives from the Allied nations and the nation of Japan signed the official instrument of surrender. The ceremony was broadcast on radio around the world. The USS Missouri was overcrowded with 3,000 sailors and Allied military leaders from other nations in attendance. They witnessed, as best they could, one of the most historic events of the 20th century. An armada of 200 warships joined the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay for the event. There was an impressive flyover by 1,500 naval aircraft and 400 B-29s. A massive display of U.S. force to ensure the peace that had begun. Here's a brief video clip of the surrender ceremony.
The defeated nation comes face to face with their conquerors on the USS Missouri at the surrender ceremony on September 2nd, 1945. Tokyo Bay is clogged with hundreds of powerful gleaming American fighting ships. At 8:55 a.m., the Japanese delegation reaches the Missouri. Finally, General MacArthur makes his entrance with Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz and Admiral William Halsey.
It is my earnest hope, and indeed the hope of all mankind, that from this solemn occasion a better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past, a world founded upon faith and understanding, a world dedicated to the dignity of man and the fulfillment of his most cherished wish for freedom, tolerance, and justice.
The signing of the surrender signals the official end to a savage conflict. After the Japanese, it's MacArthur's turn. Then come the representatives of 9 other Allied powers. As the Japanese are led away, the victors put on one final display of triumph. 1,500 planes, Boeing Superfortresses, and Navy fighters roar across the sky.
At the conclusion of the ceremony, General MacArthur said, quote, "It is my earnest hope, and indeed the hope of all mankind, that from this solemn occasion a better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past, a world dedicated to the dignity of man and the fulfillment of his most cherished wish for freedom, tolerance, and justice." He concluded his remarks by saying, quote, "Let us pray that peace be now restored to the world, and that God will preserve it always." On September 31st, General MacArthur officially took command of the Japanese government in Tokyo. While celebrations of the war's end took place around the world, its devastation was not forgotten, even in the European theater, which had seen the war's end 4 months earlier. Morgan County, Indiana native Sergeant Emily E. Johnson, who enlisted in the Women's Army Corps early in 1943, was assigned to the Allied Force headquarters in Italy in late 1944. She wrote to her parents in September 1945 from her location in Italy's Po Valley in the Apennine Mountains. Quote, "One evening last week, we got a Jeep, and at sunset we drove out a few miles to Purple Heart Valley on the Volturno River, where so many American lives were lost." Parenthetically, that would be about 55,000. Continuing with her quote, "It was absolutely beautiful. The sunsets here are gorgeous anyway, with the mountains all around. And this valley with this huge river running through was beautiful. I wanted to cry, to think something so lovely holds such an awful story." Thankfully, the last chapter of the awful story that took place in so many lovely parts of the world had come to a close. World War II had finally ended. There was, however, still much work to be done in Japan following the official surrender ceremony on September 2nd. That work began with the priorities of freeing U.S. prisoners of war still being held by Japan and ensuring the hard-earned peace by sending U.S. occupation forces to mainland Japan. Both efforts started on August 30th, 3 days before the official surrender ceremony on the USS Missouri. Operation Swift Mercy was the code name for the mission to recover thousands of American POWs still held by Japan. The U.S. military ordered the Japanese commanders of POW compounds to paint the large white letters PW on the roofs of camps holding American POWs. From August 30th through September 20th, B-17s and B-29s flew 1,000 missions and dropped leaflets informing the POWs of Japan's surrender, along with 4,500 tons of supplies to help them survive until they could be liberated by U.S. forces. Over 20,000 Allied POWs were freed over the next 2 weeks. Among them were several Morgan County, Indiana men. Calvin Hacker Jr. of Martinsville, Indiana, enlisted in the Navy on December 12, 1940. The seaman's second-class cobbler's mate was serving on the USS Pope, a Navy destroyer in the South Pacific, when the ship was sunk in the Java Sea on March 1, 1942. He and the rest of the ship's survivors were then captured by the Japanese Navy after being stranded for 60 hours in the sea. Hacker was the first of Morgan County servicemen to become a casualty of the war. Initially listed as missing in action in early 1942, Hacker was later presumed to be dead. The young man spent a grueling 3.5 years as a POW in the Makassar Celebes prison camp in the Dutch East Indies. He was finally located and liberated by the 13th Air Force on September 13, 1945. On that same August 30th date that Operation Swift Mercy had begun, thousands of Allied Army and Marine Corps forces landed on Japan to begin their occupation duties. The operation was codenamed Blacklist. William Bill Pearson of Martinsville, Indiana, was with the 4th Marine Division that landed in Tokyo on August 30th. During occupation duty, his unit was stationed at the Yokosuka Naval Base. In a letter to his parents, he wrote, "For the last 2 days, we have been going on patrols in the vicinity of Yokosuka. We went to 2 or 3 naval bases and disarmed the Japs. The Japs seemed willing to cooperate. I think most of them were very glad that the war is over. So far, we have not had any trouble with them." Corporal Pearson was also involved in several surrender ceremonies, where Japanese officers presented their sabers to the U.S. officers. Corporal Oscar Dale Edwards of the U.S. Army, also from Morgan County, Indiana, found himself on Japan for occupation duty as well. Edwards was drafted in 1942 and was serving in the Philippines with Company B, 27th Signal Corps when the war ended. The members of his unit were then taken to Japan and stayed in a Japanese military academy in Tokyo. He wrote in a letter to his wife, quote, "The school we are living in was doing war work as well as teaching. The gymnasium was filled with all kinds of machines. The Japs are workers. They were very willing to cooperate with us, and when we reached here there were 500 or more Japanese boys moving all the stuff out for us. They were rather afraid of us at first, but now the kids are asking for chocolate and cigarettes. They can't speak English, but somehow managed to pick that much up somewhere." End of quote. Robert Bob Patterson of Mooresville, Indiana, also had a role in the occupation. He helped ferry Army occupation troops to Japan. Patterson was assigned as a Navy cook on the USS Proton, a landing ship tank, LST-1078, that carried troops and equipment. At the end of August, the ship left Pearl Harbor on orders to deliver Army troops for their occupation duty in Japan. One final account of occupation duty is worth noting. Sergeant Herman Strakus, an Indiana transplant from South Dakota, was assigned to duty in Nagasaki with the 2nd Marine Division. During an interview, he reported the following humorous incident that took place outside a commercial building his unit had converted into living quarters. On the day the Marines finally succeeded in piping fresh water for showers, the following took place, and I quote Strakis. All of our guys are out there standing, taking a shower, and here comes these Japanese people with pots and pans, and they walk right into the shower area to catch the fresh water. And our people about kill themselves trying to get back into the building. They run and jump and go like crazy. Everybody is naked as a jaybird. And the Japanese men and women alike, they could care less about it. They let them run all around. But you know what? 3 days later, our guys just stayed there. They would stand there and shower, and women could stand there right next to them with a pot catching water. And nobody gave a hoot. All the modesty went out the window in 3 days' time. We'd become friendly people. End of quote. Becoming friendly people was the sought-after objective for the United States and Japan in the post-war months and years ahead. A goal that, thankfully, was ultimately accomplished. Learn more about World War II history during 1945 and the stories of those who served in my World War II trilogy, Our Service, Our Stories, Volumes 1, 2, and 3. The books are available for purchase on my website, ronaldpmay.com. To contact me for questions or to schedule me for a speaking engagement, email me at ron@ronaldpmay.com. Also, be sure to check out all my other videos on my YouTube channel at World War II History and Stories with Ron May. You will find a link to my videos on the YouTube tab from the homepage of my website. Please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. Thanks for tuning into this episode. Please share it with others who you think may be interested. See you next month for our episode 22, featuring the events and stories of October 1945 on World War II at 80.